Beneath the waves lies one of Earth's most intelligent, mysterious, and majestic predators, the killer whale. For centuries, they were rulers of the sea, wild, untamed, and boundless. Creatures of vast oceans, living in tightly knit families, speaking in languages we still struggle to fully understand. But in the last 50 years, everything changed. Humans pulled them from their vast kingdoms, tearing them from their mothers, their pods, and their freedom, and placed them into tanks of concrete and glass. What unfolded inside these marine parks was not just entertainment, it became an industry, a spectacle fueled by power, profit, and tragedy. Smiles on the surface concealed a darker reality beneath. Behind the applause, behind the carefully choreographed shows, lies a truth far more disturbing than the world was ever meant to see. This is not just a story about whales. It is a story about power, profit, tragedy, and the dark untold history of SeaWorld. What really happened inside the tanks at SeaWorld? The answers will shock you, and they were never meant to be seen. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. It helps us bring more untold stories like this to light. It began in the 1960s, an era when humanity first looked at the ocean and thought, what if we could bring the wild into our world? To the public, it seemed like a dream. Majestic black and white giants soaring through the air, splashing water across smiling faces and bowing gracefully to applause. But behind the curtain of wonder, there was a darker truth. The story of the killer whales in captivity did not begin with applause. It began with screams. Boats roared across the sea, slicing through the waves as pods of orcas were hunted down. Families swam desperately, mothers shielding their young. But it was no use. Nets dropped from the sky like traps from another world. Calves, just babies, were torn from their mothers, hoisted into boats as the ocean itself seemed to cry out in grief. Witnesses described it as unbearable. The sounds, the piercing screams of mothers chasing the boats, circling for hours, refusing to leave the spot where their young had been taken. That sound would haunt the men who were there for the rest of their lives. In 1965, one of the first captured whales, Namu, was brought to a sea pen in Washington. For the first time, the public looked into the eyes of a killer whale, not in the wild, but through the glass of captivity. And the reaction? Shock, awe, fascination. Crowds poured in by the thousands, desperate to see the tamed killer of the deep. Children pressed their hands to the glass, marveling as Namu swam in circles, confined to a pen that was only a fraction of the space he once commanded in the wild. It was the beginning of something powerful and something dangerous, because once the world saw the money, the spectacle, the empire of entertainment that orcas could build, there was no turning back. What started with Namu quickly spread. Parks wanted more whales, bigger shows, bigger profits, and so the hunts continued. Entire pods decimated. The ocean stained not with blood, but with silence, as families were broken apart forever. But what the world didn't know then was that this empire of profit would come at a cost no one could imagine. SeaWorld had discovered a secret the world would pay to see. By the early 1970s, the park expanded at a breathtaking pace, and at the heart of it were the killer whales. The whales became the crown jewel of the park. Trainers performed stunts that seemed impossible, standing atop the whales' massive noses, swimming beside them, even riding their backs as the audience erupted in awe. It was mesmerizing. Families flocked in by the thousands. Children pointed with wide eyes, mouths agape, and the money flowed, rising with each leap, each splash, each perfectly timed flip. But behind the spectacle, a darker reality simmered. These were animals that once roamed hundreds of miles each day, diving up to 500 feet in search of food, navigating complex social hierarchies and bonds that lasted a lifetime. Now they were confined to pools no larger than a suburban swimming pool. The water was filtered, the tanks polished, but nothing could replace the freedom of the open ocean. Natural hierarchies collapsed. Dominant whales lashed out. Submissive whales cowered. Stress became a constant companion. Aggression grew quietly until it could no longer be contained. And then, tragedy struck. Young whales, separated from their families, struggled to find balance in a world that was not their own. Older whales, with decades of experience in the wild, were forced into monotonous routines, performing every single day, every single hour, for the amusement of spectators. The very minds that once orchestrated sophisticated hunts and complex communication were now trapped in cycles of repetition. It wasn't just their bodies that suffered, it was their souls. Captivity eroded their mental stability. The result was confusion, fear, and sometimes explosive violence. And yet, the public saw only the dazzling performances. They saw the leaps, the spins, the synchronized choreography. They did not see the quiet desperation beneath the surface, the grief, the boredom, the loneliness, and the rage. The raise of SeaWorld was a triumph of entertainment, but it was also a triumph over nature, a story of captivity that would leave scars far deeper than anyone could imagine. And as the 1970s rolled on, the whales world and the trainers world was about to collide in ways no one could foresee. What happens when the world's most intelligent predator is pushed beyond its breaking point? The first warning signs appeared as early as 1971. A young trainer, Annette Eckes, was working with the famous Shamu when a single misstep turned into a near-fatal incident. The whale grabbed her and dragged her to the bottom of the pool. She survived, battered and terrified. But the message was clear. These were wild, powerful predators, not performers. And yet the shows continued. The public, captivated by leaps, flips, and dramatic splashes, rarely saw what happened behind the curtain. Over the decades, incidents escalated. Trainers were bitten, dragged, and thrown across tanks. Some nearly drowned. Others suffered permanent injuries. Every incident was a stark reminder. The whales were not pets. They were apex predators, confined to environments far removed from the oceans they were born to roam. Then came Tilikum. Captured as a calf in 1983 off the coast of Iceland, Tilikum was ripped from his family and thrust into a life of captivity. He was transferred from Hafnarfjordur Marine Zoo to Sealand of the Pacific, and eventually to SeaWorld Orlando. Life in captivity had taken its toll. In smaller tanks, forced to perform monotonous routines, Tilikum's natural instincts collided with human expectations. Stress, isolation, and frustration built like a storm inside him. Tilikum was involved in the deaths of 3 people. One by one, the incidents became grim headlines. 1991, Kelty Byrne, Sealand of the Pacific. A 20-year-old trainer fell into the pool and was dragged underwater. Her death shocked the world, but experts considered it a tragic consequence of captivity. 1999, Daniel Duke's SeaWorld trespasser, a 27-year-old man entered the pool at night and was found drowned. While his actions were illegal, the incident revealed just how dangerous confinement could make these massive animals. 2010, Dawn Brancheau, SeaWorld. Dawn, one of the park's most experienced and beloved trainers, was tragically killed by Tilikum. Her death shattered the image of SeaWorld as a safe, magical place. But Tilikum was not the first to suffer. The history of captivity was dark from the very beginning. In Penn Cove, 1970, 5 orcas died during capture operations. Explosives were used to scatter pods, nets tore through families, and the dead whales were weighted and concealed. The public never knew the scale of these early tragedies until reports emerged months later. And then there was Lolita, also known as Tokatai. Captured in 1970, she was placed in a tank measuring only 80 by 35 feet and 20 feet deep, one of the smallest orca pools in the world. Her life became a symbol of confinement. She spent over 5 decades in that tank. Plans were made to move her to a sea pen in her native waters, where she might have reunited with her mother, widely believed to be L25, nicknamed Ocean Sun, now estimated to be over 90 years old. Tragically, Lolita passed away on August 18th to 19th, 2023, before her release could occur. Her story highlighted the long-term consequences of captivity and the limits of even the best-intended rehabilitation. Even attempts at rescue sometimes failed. Keiko, the star of Free Willy, was flown back to Iceland in 1998. Despite efforts to reintroduce him to the wild, he struggled to adapt. He swam to Norway and, in December 2003, succumbed to pneumonia. Keiko's story demonstrated that once orcas are raised in human care, the ocean can become a foreign world. Dawn's death, Lolita's confinement, Keiko's struggle, they all told the same story. These were not just animals. They were intelligent, social, and complex beings whose lives were forever altered by the drive for entertainment. The image of SeaWorld as a place of wonder shattered overnight. Cheerful music, laughing crowds, applause. They could no longer mask the cost of captivity. Tilikum, Dawn, Lolita, and countless other whales became symbols of a harsh truth. Nature cannot be contained without consequence. The tragedies had begun, and they were only the beginning. For every whale performing under the lights, there was a story unseen, a life confined, and a world of sorrow lurking beneath the surface. By the 2000s, the world had begun asking questions. Serious, uncomfortable questions. Why were these powerful, intelligent predators kept in tiny tanks? Why did their dorsal fins, normally straight and proud in the wild, collapse in captivity? Why did aggression erupt in confined pools, when in the open ocean, such behavior was almost unheard of? The tipping point came in 2013 with a documentary that would change everything. Blackfish. Millions of viewers witnessed for the first time the hidden side of SeaWorld. They saw Tilikum's story, the stories of Kelty Byrne, Daniel Dukes, and Dawn Brancheau. They saw the lifelong confinement of Lolita. The film presented the consequences of a system that prized entertainment over animal welfare. Public opinion shifted almost overnight. Attendance at SeaWorld parks dropped. Stock prices fell. Protests erupted outside the gates. People demanded change. SeaWorld tried to fight back. Executives claimed the whales were well treated. Trainers were safe. The shows were educational. But the tide had turned. The backlash was more than public outrage. It was a reckoning. Scientists, activists, and former trainers joined voices to expose the truth. Confinement had lasting physical, mental, and social effects on these magnificent creatures. The once celebrated performances, the laughter and applause, they could no longer mask the cost of captivity. Whales were not circus animals. They were sentient, social, and complex beings whose lives had been altered forever. The world had seen the consequences, and for SeaWorld, there was no turning back. Policies would change. Lawsuits would be filed. The age of the killer whale spectacle was coming to an end, and the animals who had endured decades of confinement would finally become symbols of a hard-learned lesson. Nature cannot be controlled without cost. The backlash was only the beginning. What once seemed like entertainment was revealed as a cautionary tale, and the world was watching, finally awake to the dark truth lurking beneath the waves. But if SeaWorld was finally forced to face the truth, what would happen to the whales still trapped inside the tanks? After decades of controversy, tragedy, and public scrutiny, SeaWorld finally announced the end of its orca breeding program. No new whales would be captured. No calves would be born in the parks. The era of theatrical whale shows, the towering leaps, the dramatic flips, the applause-filled arenas, was slowly fading into history. But for the whales still confined within concrete tanks, the story is far from over. Many orcas, like Lolita, also known as tokitai, remain in captivity, living out their lives in enclosures barely larger than a fraction of their natural habitat. Her tank, roughly 80 by 35 feet and 20 feet deep, is among the smallest ever used for these giants. Across the world, other whales share similar fates, their lives dictated by schedules, routines, and walls that cannot mimic the vastness of the open ocean. The dark, untold story of SeaWorld is not just a tale of corporate profit, public spectacle, or human tragedy. It is a story of confinement, of apex predators stripped of freedom, of natural instincts forced to collide with human entertainment. It is also a story that challenges humanity. Do we have the right to cage the giants of the ocean for our amusement? Do we understand the cost of our curiosity, our desire for spectacle, and our need to control nature? For the whales who remain, hope exists. Hope that one day their captivity may end, and their species may thrive in the wild once more. For humanity, the lesson is clear. All comes at a price, and respect for life cannot be measured in applause or ticket sales. This is the untold story of SeaWorld, and the whales who paid the ultimate price for our fascination, our entertainment, and our neglect. If you were moved by their story, share this video to raise awareness. Support organizations working to protect these majestic animals. And next time, before buying a ticket to a show, ask yourself, is entertainment worth the cost of freedom? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the natural world.